So once again, I'm Dominic Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of IDA. And I'm here this morning to say the first few words by way of introduction for this fireside chat between Orwa Nyrabia and Jean-Marie Teno. I'm stalling for people to get to sit. All right, thanks very much. Thanks so much. So I'm going to say a few words, if I may, about Orwa, and then Orwa will come out and introduce Jean-Marie. So Orwa Nyrabia is one of our amazing IDA board members, first of all, but also, as you may know, artistic director of the International Documentary Festival Amsterdam, IDFA, and previously a filmmaker, producer, sometime actor, originally from Syria, moving through Germany, and now, of course, in the Netherlands. And as he told me yesterday, among all these places, his home is really the reception of a documentary film event. We were at such a thing when he told me this. So it's great to welcome Orwa home to this, to Getting Real 2024, and we're grateful that he's been here this week. We've only known each other a few short months since I took on this role, but it's been really important to me, all my conversations with Orwa. He's somebody in the context of IDA who helps us think differently, carefully, in new ways about how, as IDA, we go about our work, and particularly makes me aware of institutional habits of thought that perhaps hinder IDA and other US organizations from properly responding to and addressing the documentary film community worldwide. So to introduce Jean-Marie Teno, I give you Orwa Nyrabia.
Good morning. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thank you very much, Dominic, for this generous introduction. This beautiful theater makes things feel very formal. I hope you know that formality is a construct. And if I may suggest, before I introduce our wonderful guest, that you come a bit closer so that you can interrupt us when you would like to. So I think it would be lovely if everybody tries to sit strategically closer to us in the middle. Yeah, because I don't think we need a lot of formality. We can make this beautiful place more warm by getting closer. Thank you, thank you. So for those listening to us, I'm Orwa. I am a tall man. Where I come from, I'm very tall. Where I live today, I'm average. Around here, I think I'm okay. I'm also a wide man, not only tall. I love food so much, and this shows. And I'm wearing a white shirt. Usually, a newly pressed white shirt gives me confidence. So whenever you see me in a white shirt, you know that I feel responsibility at this moment. That is because I'm going to be having a chat with one of my heroes. And it's a wonderful thing when one grows up into a place where one is invited to talk to one of these heroes. It takes time and work, but when you get there, it really is brilliant. Jean-Marie Teno is just one thing. He's a filmmaker. He makes brilliant films. And he made many films in his country of Cameroon that meant so much to me growing up in film. He was always one of the few that I was following up from the African continent. watching his films whenever I can. That at the time took a lot of work because you had to send endless emails to many people who do not reply until somebody replies and promises you a DVD screener, and then you get the DVD screener. And then you discover Africa in a way that has nothing to do with the Africa one sees on television, one sees in the movies. An Africa that is real, that cares, a filmmaker's gaze that is organic and powerful, that is so loving, that is not contributing to tropes and stereotypes or not contributing to them. The question of stereotyping, of looking at Africa and African people through problematic or colonial eyes is not there. So it is not that it is a decolonized cinema. It is a cinema that doesn't care about the question of a colonial gaze or a decolonial gaze. It is African cinema. It is not anything else. So after all that, I would love to introduce this wonderful hero to you, Jean-Marie Teno. Would you please honor us? Come join me on stage.
Thank you, Orwa, for all these kind words.
I've been hiding them for years. So, I think we should imagine a fire here, right? Okay. And make sure that this is a chat, that we're all friends. I have to tell you that you can all interrupt us, raise your hand, go out and come in, unless you, I don't mean in a way that disturbs the other persons next to you, but yeah, let's not take it too seriously. Jean-Marie, I'll start in the beginning.
Yes.
There was a young Jean-Marie in Cameroon heading to the airport. Why was he heading to the airport, and what did he want? What did he imagine on arrival after he takes a plane out of the country, goes somewhere?
Well, that idea of even going to the airport never even crossed my mind, actually. And I found myself having a scholarship to go to Great Britain, and I bought the plane, and I arrived, and it was 10 p.m., it was still daylight. I was just wondering, where the hell am I? Normally, I know that at 6 p.m. it's night where I grew up, and I discovered all these differences, and I didn't even expect anything, because Europe, we studied Europe in school. We knew so much about Europe and so little about our own country. So I was almost in a familiar space when I arrived in Great Britain. And then when I arrived in Paris, it was even more, because I knew almost everything about France, but so little about Cameroon.
I think this is enough. We can go now.
Yes.
So, I remember, it's known that you did not first get the scholarship to study filmmaking, but then you changed.
Yes. Actually, when you receive a scholarship, it's almost like a pass that allows you to go, and it could be on chemistry, on physics, on anything. When you had a scholarship, it was just a way for you to live and to go. And so I received a scholarship to do electrical engineering. And I spent only 1 year in England, because when I got in England, I discovered the student union, I discovered the political movements in the union, and all these big discourses. And that was more interesting for me than going into doing these electrical things. And after 1 year, I didn't have any scholarship anymore, and the British Council was giving me a hard time. So I just said, okay, well, I'm I'm returning home. So I returned to Cameroon when school was already started, and I was in the neighborhood. When people say, you were in London and you came back, are you crazy? No one comes back. Why did you come back? So that was my first experiment, going to Europe and coming back, and then starting at scratch, working for the radio station and really enjoying being in the neighborhood.
And then film happened.
And then film happened. My meeting with film was really when I returned to France again, doing work, preparing myself for television, and then there was a television station that was starting in Cameroon. I was among those who was selected to go to train for television, and when I finished, the television was not there yet, so I was working in the television station in France, in the technical part. So I bought a 16mm camera, second-hand, and because there was a lab, that's how I started making my own film, 16 film on 16mm, processing them in the lab and going back and forth. And we had a newspaper with some friends in Paris called Buana, and I was writing for films at that time without any real training, but I loved film. I watched film and I was writing. I'm so embarrassed to even read what things that I was writing at that time, but we were writing about film.
And then you took the 16mm camera back home.
Yes, and the 16mm, no, I stayed in France actually.
Okay.
And because I was writing for film, I went to FESPACO in 1983, and there I met Sembene Ousmane, I met Souleymane Cissé, I met the first generation of African filmmakers. I had seen almost every film that was made on the continent by then, and I had a conversation with Souleymane Cissé, the one who did Figné, Bara, and we had a half an hour conversation because I had a tape recorder, one of his Bobino tape recorder, and after 1 hour tapes, after the tape was finished, Souleymane said to me, but you are not a journalist. You should be making films. You cannot be continuing to just ask this question, because the question you're asking about my films are really not the question that the journalists usually ask. And say, we are not so many of us making films. You should be making films. And that's when I left, I said, if Souleymane Cissé, that I admire, having seen so many of his films, Bara, Figné says so, maybe there is something here. And the camera that I had, I started filming my friends in Paris, and that's how, a few months later, I made my first film. And the next trip home, because after that I was working for the television, I went home we had 1 month leave. I went with that camera home, and I made my first short film, Homage.
I remember you speaking about how making your first film was in a way driven by a feeling of discomfort.
Yes. Discomfort has always been present in motivating me into addressing issues. And my very first film was, the discomfort was that my father passed away. I was the eldest son. They kept the funeral for 5 years for me to return home, and then I came home with my 16mm camera, and I was filming what was happening, and also with a still camera, we made a lot of stills, and it was a rainy season, so the camera broke down. We had only 3 rolls, and I continued making pictures. And the discomfort was really trying to understand the kind of conversation we used to have with my father, trying to pay homage to him, and at the same time asking myself, if I'm going to be making films, what kind of film am I going to be making? What footstep am I going to trace? On the African cinema, there were not many people who were making documentary films. And at the same time, I had many good friends who were stand-up comedians. And for me, it was a nice way to combine comedy, because I love comedy, and talking about the things that really matter. So this question of mourning at the same time, not taking it too dramatically was important for me to make homage and to remember the conversations with my father. So I invented that dialogue between two people. And the first film was totally like an ovni. Two people are talking, you never see them. And on this dialogue, you have the everyday images. And then at the end, there is the twist that really says that one of the characters is me, and actually the two characters are two faces of who I was, the one who stayed in the village and the one who went to the city and then to Europe, and there was a confrontation between this, what we were calling at that time, tradition and modernity. So I had this in a 13-minute film called Homage that I watched again 30 years after. At one point when I was really asking myself, do I really want to continue making films? But when I watched Homage again, I really understood why I wanted to make film and the kind of playfulness, the kind of amusement that cinema was, because I did even special effects, but like a small, the pioneers always did, because no one knew how to do it, and I kept asking people, how do you put two images together? All this was just fun, and when I saw Homage again, and I understood that the playfulness of cinema was something that also drew me to cinema. And at the same time, the hardship of life around me also always pushed me to, if I'm going to speak, what am I going to speak about? If I'm going to take 1 hour of people's time, what am I going to be telling them? And this question became more and more important to the continuation of my career.
The question of playfulness is always often put in contradiction with the question of documentary.
Yes.
I can't help but remember that brilliant phrase or quote from Safi Faye, may she rest in peace. Safi Faye was a great Senegalese filmmaker who passed away a year ago, or less than 2 years ago. When she said that she believed that differentiating or separating fiction from documentary needs so much privilege, and that to her, no African filmmaker can ever do that. We
Absolutely.
cannot see documentary as not fiction or fiction as not documentary.
Absolutely.
So this question of playfulness and comedy there takes me here to the question of also reality. So there is a terrible reality in front of you, but you are processing it through sarcasm and irony and, you know, a certain joy despite all of it. What can you tell us about this? Because it's very clear in your first feature film.
And also, we can also add the entertainment part, because we grew up watching a lot of Indian, what they call Bollywood films. And in these films, it was always some moments where there was the dancing, the music, continuing to bring the story. For us, it was almost a way of also telling stories and really allowing people to relax and prepare them to something very harsh by giving them a little bit of amusement. And also when you listen to storytellers, and when you even listen to old people talk in my village, for instance, they always mix songs. There's nothing, it's never a linear kind of conversation. People start something, and when they want to digress, it can be a song, it can be all these elements contribute to storytelling and to telling the story that they want to tell at that moment. And we approach film as Africans from a place where we always said, what do we really bring to the narrative? You cannot always be going through the 3 acts or 5-act structure and all these that we keep teaching in schools. And so at one point we just say, I want to tell a story, and who is telling the story? Where am I to telling you that story? What are the elements you need to have for your story to exist? And then you start building it up, and from time to time, you make pause, you prepare some effect. It's just playing and playing with the public, entering into a conversation, using the music in a way. And in my first feature film, Bikutsi Water Blues, I had a band who was playing. Music was always part. The fictional part was, for me, the element to allow what you can say, the documentary, the hard documentary part, because people kept saying to me, well, you're going to talk about water, about trash. We see that every day. That cannot be a film. So I had to create a structure where a kid comes home and he's telling what happened at school, and create the kind of narration that will allow people to enter into the film so that they can face their own reality without having the feeling that we are hammering it onto them. And I have to have one of the biggest crazy bands that existed at the time, Les Têtes Brûlées, with all these gimmicks and on stage, and people were shocked to see them. So all these elements contribute to a way of interesting people, challenging what they are expecting, and giving them the chance to have a good time watching a documentary, because they always thought, when are you going to make a film? And when I showed Bikutsi Water Blues in Cameroon in 1989, there was half an hour of trailers. There was Rambo, there were American action films that were shown. And then I showed Bikutsi Water Blues, and people are just saying, when are you going to make a film like these films with fighting, with action? And well, I said, you're going to have the documentary. But when the Têtes Brûlées were there, and suddenly that was a long time ago, and people gradually start getting used to looking at their own reality, especially in a place where censorship is so strong, and when you're not allowed to talk about what you're seeing.
I will get to that soon, being not allowed, but I will start with the first not allowed, because you speak about a topic so dear to me, which is the three act structure. Okay. You had a career of fighting with colonial funding.
Yes.
You've always been famously angry about colonial funders.
Yes.
And,
I've not always been angry with them. The thing is, when I did Afrique, je te plumerai.
The English title of this film is
yes,
not as good as the French, but it is Africa, I Will Fleece You.
Yes, or Africa, I Will Plug You Clean. Many people translated it, you know. So, but this film, when I started, it was a film about reading the writers, how they witnessed their time during the colonial period. And someone had told me later that when you want to address hard issues, just don't present them too harsh. Just say you're going to do something nice. So I had a lot of funding because it was about reading and writing. And of course, the colonial funders really were champions of teaching us how to read and how to write. And gradually, when we started going a little deeper, when they saw Afrique, je te plumerai, they say, what? This is where we put all this funding? And it was really shocked, and many people predicted that I will never get any funds from them anymore, but I just say, well, c'est la vie, so. And then Germany, fortunately, with Arte, and with Arte from Germany, ZDF, I had Eckarstein, who is not there. He had a slot called The Small Window, where I was fortunate to have a few films that was commissioned by him, and that allowed me to continue making films without depending on the institutional funders in France.
But that was never a lot of money.
Yes, but I never really had enough money to make films. At one point, I became also a producer, and I produced a young filmmaker Idrissou Morakpai, Sigariki, and for the first time I received so much money, but it was not for my film. Yeah, I was as a producer, and that was, yeah, that was good at that time. Yeah?
So, if we go back home to the question of, I mean, put aside the role of Europe or colonialism and funding and go to what's happening at home, the limitations of work, because it's very common to talk about, these days we're only talking about money, I think. So there is no money for your work in Cameroon, no funding, but there is more than that. There is pressure, there is limitations. How was this journey through the different changes in Cameroon's political map?
The political map in Cameroon hasn't changed much. Cameroon became independent under brackets in 1960. Since we've had 2 presidents. And the actual current president, who is probably 95, was the prime minister of, he has been in power for almost 60 years. So things haven't been really changing. And the political situation is that when we started making films in the 80s and 80s and in the 90s, people would say, no, you are exaggerating. You are showing trash, but no, that cannot be the reality. We're talking about water in 88, the question of water and all the problems that water will bring. People say, you are exaggerating. Today, at that time, there were still some public water supplies, but all of these have disappeared. And now, everybody is supposed to have water in the house, but when I'm living more and more in Cameroon, but every morning, you have to turn on the tap. If there is water, you put water in buckets and you save, because you don't know if in 2 or 3 hours' time we are not going to cut water. The same for electricity. It's almost like the shortage of the basic necessities have become a way to keep people under pressure. So when I'm here or when I'm in France and there is water, there is electricity, it's almost like you don't have to worry about that. But all over Cameroon and even in many other African countries, it has become a policy of keeping people under pressure for these basic things. For the internet, well, how can you do business now without really having internet? The internet is working scarcely. So we're in a situation where with all the resources that we have, with all the raw materials that we have, and Cameroon is a rich country, Congo, rich country, but the basic necessities that allow people to be able to become productive are not there, because I think it's a deliberate policy not to give that, not to make that popular so that people can live and can be productive and can move forward, because Africa is in a place where it needs to be the place of the absence, the place of need, where you don't have things. And yet we are going back and saying we're going to transform that. But to transform that, we need to have some responsible leadership. When all the elections are rigged, but there is some light coming up. Senegal, we didn't think that in Senegal things could change, and yet you have a new generation arriving in Senegal. We even have the army in Mali, in Niger, and you have young military who are just there trying to kick the European out, not because they don't want to continue to have an exchange, but try to have a fair exchange to really turn the page of this colonial mentality that always keeps. And so these things are happening now, and we are hoping that it's going to continue. And this is probably one of the turning points. But places like Cameroon, we have a 95-year-old president. He's going to run again for the next election next year. And
so the Americans are not the worst case. I'm sorry. Sorry, it was irresistible.
America has its own share, but...
in the past 2 years, you've been working hard on a project that I believe is inspiring, that is you taking a responsibility, voluntarily taking the responsibility of starting a film school in Cameroon for the new generation of Cameroonian, putting all your knowledge and what you have achieved in your life at the service of potential new filmmaking in the country. I'll ask our friends in the tech control to show the slides.
Yes, this notion of transmission, there are ages, the age where you learn, the age where you enjoy, and the age where you start giving to others so that others can grow also. So in 2015, I was invited by some young filmmakers to be part of the group to lead them into the documentary. They were trying to make documentaries. And I was appalled by the kind of subject that they were addressing. And it was so complicated, so circumvoluted. And I just sat there and said, look, let's go and walk in the street. There are so many things that you can talk about. Why is it that all your projects seem so absurd, so complicated? And they say, well, we want a film that can have a chance to be at IDFA, at Berlin, at all these places.
I trusted you, man.
And I said, well, come on, that cannot be they say, yes, but that's what, when people come, they all want us to do this kind of very complex thing. And I said, well, maybe I'll come back again and we work. But when I said that, people start being scared, saying, oh, he's going to make political film, he's going to make political training. So someone said, well, why not do something about heritage? So that's why I said, I'm going to train people in making documentaries, but the topic was going to be the heritage, our heritage. No one is talking about it. Everything is disappearing. If you have a subject in relationship with the heritage, you come and we train you into doing that. And of course, in heritage, you can put everything, memory, history, political, all the questions. So at that time, I was in Wellesley as a fellow, Wellesley College. And at Emerson, they were getting rid of HD cameras. And one of my friends was teaching, they say, oh, we are getting rid of all these cameras. So I went and I applied, and I got 10 cameras that I brought home. And that's with these 10 cameras that I started the training. And it was amazing because you had people who had a master's in film production in the university who had never touched the camera. And so they come to my place and they have, oh, we have 10 cameras with tripod, and we could start the workshop. So I did the first one. I was the only one working with them. There were 5 of them. We made 5 short films because I wanted that everyone to make a film. And it's a 3-month workshop where we go from an idea, gradually define a film project, and then they go, they shoot, and then they come back, they edit. And in the course of 3 months, there is a film between 20 to 30 minutes maximum. So we did it the first year, the second year, and then there was the COVID, and we started again in 2021, and now the 4th edition was 2023. That finishes a few weeks ago. And in the course of these 4 years, we have made 22 short films, and I raise funds. It's free tuition. I raise funds, and people come. We live in the same place. They eat, they sleep, and they watch films because I bring films from all over so that people can watch films, and they go and they make their film. And at the end, they have one film that they can show to do application for other projects. But the big part of my budget was always find a place where we can all be living together, the food. And so I had this old barn where I grew up, and that 2 years ago I just said, why not transform it and turn it into the center where everything will happen, and a place where also I will store my work, because Rochester, they want my archival footage. Many places in the US want to have all my work, and I'm saying maybe it's time for people to come to Cameroon, to a place, and find my work where the work is made. So this place is also going to be the place where my work will be. And I'm slowly building this place. We have put the roof, we have, there will be space for people to stay, there will be place for working, we'll have a small library, and then when we are not doing workshops, people can come and develop their projects. So we're trying to make, I'm not calling it really a school, because a school means you have a professor. It's just a place where those who have more experience are accompanying those who are starting, in a way like they are learning but not having a magistral course, you know. They come with the idea to make a film, and we go through the different steps, and the theory comes gradually whenever we are encountering them. And that's how we are doing like a companionship in a way, and I will be bringing people from all over the world to come and stay and share their knowledge
and teach how to make 3-act.
And that will be challenging most of the time, because whenever we come and make the theory, we'll just say, okay, you do that, but vis-a-vis a big storyteller from here, what does he think about this 3-act thing? And people, you might just come and say, fuck the 3-act.
We're here, and you can join us in the discussion. Raise your hand so that you get a microphone, and you're very welcome to comment, to reflect, to ask a question. There. Somebody in the back is hoping for a microphone. And for everyone watching us live streamed, I'm sorry. I mean, you can ask the question.
Hello, hello, Jean-Marie. Thank you so much. My name's Ankita. I'm originally from India, and I'm based here now. And I'm connecting so much to everything you're saying, because, I mean, I grew up watching Bollywood, and for me, like for every Indian and everybody who outside the US who doesn't know Bollywood does know it has a big impact on our lives. And one thing I wanted to understand from you is, challenge I'm facing as a filmmaker is the issue of, like, in my head, I have a certain idea of India, and I have a certain way of thinking about my subjects. But then the Western world has a very different perception of my country. And there's always the acceptability part, that if I shoot it in a certain way, I will shoot it the way an Indian would shoot it, but it wouldn't really be acceptable to the Western eye. So I'm always in this flux. So how did you handle those kind of emotions and that understanding? Because your understanding of Cameroon as a local is very different, and then but then portraying it to the Western eye just for the funding is also different. So I feel we're always in a colonial flux. So how did you handle that as a filmmaker?
Well, that's a tough question. How do I handle that? But do I really handle that? At one point, I just said, really, I don't care. At the beginning, people came to me when I was making films on the urban Africa. It was also the time when there were very famous African filmmakers who were making the films about the village, and people would say, but there are no cities, there are no people living in cities in Africa. Why are you bringing us all these questions about the urban Africa? That doesn't exist. And so we want the village, we want the CalArts, we want all these are the Africa we want. I just say, okay. So what else can you say when people say things like that? So I just went on and made films and hoping that one day things will change, and things have changed. And at the same time, when I make film, my films were very critically attacked so often. And it didn't prevent me from making film, because if I was waiting for their approval to celebrate me, I would have stopped for a long time. And there were some of my colleagues that I can consider were mediocre, but that was celebrated, completely celebrated, and the way that was okay. And we lived together, and that was, but so everyone has to decide who he or she is going to be listening to, and what, and also there was always one question in the beginning: why are you making films? And I don't know if you are asking this question enough now. And wherever you, in 83, 85 at Facebook, this question was coming again: why do we make films? And people needed to be able at one point to sit and answer that question. And when you answer that question, well, whatever people say, Afrique de Plumerie is 30-something years old film, and when I finish that film, people say that's going to be the biggest crap that has ever been made. Some people say, oh, that's just collage, it's not cinema, and even today people are watching it again, and that's how things go, okay?
Do you keep a list of names for these people who said this was crap? Please. There's somebody there, and then the colleague here.
Hello.
Hello.
You mentioned your interest in keeping your archive of your films in Cameroon. I'm curious about the status of archival preservation in Cameroon for film generally. Is there a broader effort, and are you involved in it?
The archival question is such a hard question, because what people keep are the written archive, and you don't have a special place where you can call the Archives Nationales. You go to a court somewhere, that's where you can find some written archive on some trials. That's what. But visually, we hardly have anything left. Most of our visual archives are outside, and even the films that I did 30 years ago are now considered as archives, because things have been changing so drastically, and there is no policy of preserving anything, because actually cinema has never been the ally of the people in power. At the beginning, in the 1960s, when most of the African countries were newly independent, the governments wanted intellectuals to come and help build the new state. But when filmmakers started making films, and they said, but we wanted you to come and work with us, but not to be always so critical. So, and that's when there was a divide, and now they are keeping not so many things. And the policy of archiving is now that we are a young generation of people who are starting archive I know in Cameroon there is a group trying to keep archive, and also France is trying to get rid of some of the images, and they are handling them over to some young people who will be using them in the country.
The young lady.
Hello, I'm Yatin from Taiwan. I know nowadays a lot of young people are like fascinated with TikTok or short video. And while you are doing your heritage workshop, working with them, what's the changing? What's the impact to them? Can you express more? Like how to get, like what do you learn and what do you change and what do you observe from doing this process? Thank you.
That's a difficult one, because the whole short video thing, it has become such a wide phenomenon, and at the same time, we're trying to have people who have a critical look on reading images. But I'm not the best person to be able to analyze what is really happening with all these short videos, because these short videos are addictive. You are just there having short clips, and yet this is probably the state of the moment. But at the same time, I don't know how this is going to play in a few years' time. And when I'm receiving people who are trying to make a film, to make a structure, a construct, something that they really want to express, to say, and not just a clip or a selfie, that's when you realize that there is such a level of ignorance about images. So what you're trying to do is also encourage the critical thinking, looking at all these images, try to really understand what they are doing. Because the notion, this time, the time constraint, where you just take your phone, you film, and you don't even know what you're filming, you just film, and sometimes you watch it, sometimes you don't, but it's another form of art. But at the same time, what are you really filming? What are you really trying to say? All this way of really questioning that our generation had when you had celluloid, when you had to sit, to pose, to really frame and make sure, all that seems to disappear gradually. So I'm not the best person to analyze that. I'm receiving people who want to make film, and of course they know how to make a quick scene, but how do you put all these elements to make sense? All these young people who know how to use Premiere Pro come to me, say they are editors. I say, yes, of course. But now you say, okay, now let's construct a narration, let's talk, let's really, and so that they show something and you say you can do it differently, and it's after they spend 2 or 3 weeks that they realize that there is really a difference between, knowing how to program quickly and try to turn elements into some meaningful, some meaningful story. And storytelling is editing and finding ways to play with elements and all these. And that's what we are trying to teach them. And they can go from there and do their short video if they want to, but going from the short video to a longer film, sometimes it can be masterpieces or sometimes it can just be trash. So.
After they are doing the workshop, do you find any change to them, like the way of thinking through the workshop?
Of course, there are tremendous changes, because when they come, they are just, even those who have a master's at the university, because when they are really confronted, we are just a really practical training. We are asking the hard question, and we are trying to go through and look at the film, question. So, of course, there are a lot of changes, and then they go on to make their own film, but in a different approach, because most of the questions that we ask, they start asking themselves this question, and that's how I hope that's how we learn, by starting to ask ourselves many, many questions when we are progressing into a project.
Hi, my name is Shilpi. I'm from India. I'm a filmmaker and an academic, and I work with many early career filmmakers. So really, thank you for your insights. The question I have is actually related to funding. Now in India especially, there is so much money that is coming in the name of impact campaigns, and there are impact pitching forums. We are trying to figure out impact strategies. Impact producers is a new category that has come in. And, I feel like, in a way, the language with which, or the vocabulary with which this impact is, I feel like back in the day it was development communication, and now it's the new corporate world, which is impact, where so much of startup money also comes in the name of impact and regular. I want the money, but I'm deeply, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of quantifying impact. What is the impact of so-and-so film? Are you really achieving social change, et cetera, And I was thinking, how can we rethink this idea of money coming in the name of development from first world countries into countries like India or Cameroon, and and really redefine what is impact for us. I just wanted to know your thoughts about that.
Wow. I also discovered impact recently with my friend Mohamed. I don't know if he's here, with Doc A. We organized a workshop on impact, and that was really when I discovered the impact, all this impact, and it's hard, you know. And because now I'm having this training program and this school, I also discovered managing projects. You know, I need to have around me people who work on impact, people who are managing. And the problem is when you have people who are managing a project, they want always to step into telling you what is good and what is not good. They're supposed to just be managing, but they have a tendency of wanting to do more. And for me, it's really a serious problem because we are trying to be critical into thinking about all these things, that they come with all their formulas that they know how to do, and you say, okay, but wait, when we finish really addressing the artistic and aesthetic part, and you come with your, so these are new partners that we are trying to work with, and they are very incredibly talented young Africans who know how to do that. So we now need to formulate clearly what we are doing and give it into their hands so that they can play with their peers all over the world and look for the money and bring the money so that we can continue making films.
I think we'll start in the back, and maybe our last question will be from the front. Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything you shared. My question is about, I feel like even the image behind you and the work you've shared is all about bridging and connecting communities. I want to get more insight from you in terms of how you imagine this extending to the continent and to other countries around the continent, and how you potentially see this space being a wave that starts in other countries as well. As a fellow African, Ethiopian, we've been talking about gathering spaces for the past few days, and I imagine that actually informs the location and the dislocation of those spaces of gathering actually inform the nature of conversation we would be having. I feel very fortunate to be able to be here with you. I also question if the nature of our conversation and the nature of the presentation and everything would be different if we have these spaces on the continent itself. So I really want to take your idea on this. Thank you so much.
Yes. Actually, most of the things that are happening now is almost like 30 years ago when African filmmakers gathered. And for me, I have a great example. You're from Ethiopia. Haile Gerima has been so instrumental into working with us, really making us realize what cinema could be. There were organizations on the continent, the FEPACI, they were gathering. They even made this manifesto in Algiers in 1971. And I wish every young African filmmaker could read that manifesto, because it's such an important, at Algiers in 1971, to really say what cinema should be for the continent and how we could be bridging, going from Senegal to Ethiopia, and really having this federation and meeting at FESPACO. These conversations have always existed, but it's now that we are being gradually segmented. And of course, the arrival of Nollywood has brought a very important dislocation or disturbance in all this, because Nollywood came and really said, well, the market, but it was also salutary because he said that we have our market locally, we also not have to neglect that market, and they managed to find a market locally, but at the same time, what was the kind of product that we were putting in that market? So these conversations are going on, but the organization carrying them, now we have probably DocI is trying to revamp these kind of discussions, but the continent is big, and in different countries, the government are not the same, are not allowing the same kind of space for people to express themselves. So the conversation is on, actually. That's what I can say about that.
I don't know if everybody knows what FESPACO is.
Oh, Pan-African.
Do you know what FESPACO is? Raise your hand. Okay, can you briefly say what FESPACO is?
Yes, FESPACO is the Pan-African Festival Pan-Africain du Cinéma, the Ouagadougou. It was created in 1969 by Semben Tahar Sheria, by a group of African filmmakers to have a space where they could show the film, talk about film, and develop strategies so that cinema could occupy an important place in people's lives, especially considering the level of illiteracy that came after the independencies. So cinema was supposed to accompany the countries in their development.
And FESPACO still exists, still runs every year, and is a very strong African festival in Burkina Faso. I have to apologize first to you because we're out of time. I hope that you can catch Jean-Marie outside. To everybody, thank you very much. Jean-Marie, it's never enough.
Can I say one word? I have to say the last word because actually, no, coming here for me was really such a treat, actually, because having been making films that were always in the margin and going to all these festivals where documentary was always not really there, and arriving here and being in the middle of a community of people sharing the same interest and really challenges, and really it was something important. Getting real was really an important moment for me, and it's happening here in the US, a place where everybody is talking about Afrofuturism and blah, blah, and yet no one wants to look at the reality. And I think Getting Real is taking us back to really questioning and talking about what is happening now, and we need to transform that by making images. And I just wanted to say that thank you, Abby, thank you, Orwa, and
thank you, everybody. Lisa, it's your turn. Your stage.
Another enormous round of applause, please, for Orwa Nyrabia and Jean-Marie Teno.